The cell was cold, but Elijah Ward didn't shiver. He sat motionless on the steel bench, his back straight against the concrete wall, the swelling on his left cheekbone pulsing like a heartbeat. Blood, dark and drying, crusted along the edge of his jaw. His lip was split. One of his eyes was nearly swollen shut. A single rivulet of blood trickled from his ear, drawn like ink in the corner of a page. And yet he didn't flinch. Stillness was survival. Silence. Discipline. Outside his cell, boots scraped across concrete. Laughter, low and drawling, echoed through the corridor. Southern, white, arrogant. He knew that sound. He'd heard it in the jungles of Kandahar, from contractors who thought the uniform gave them license to dehumanize. And he'd heard it just hours earlier, behind a decrepit gas station on Route 17, when Crescent County Sheriff Dean Whitaker and his boys had shown up. "Look what we got here," Whitaker had said. "A damn trash panda digging through the filth." Elijah hadn't looked up, not when the deputies circled him. Not when the plastic bag with half a sandwich and an old photograph fell from his coat pocket. Not even when the sheriff picked up the photo and spat, "This your mama? Or some other hood rat you banged back in the day?" He remembered the photo. His sister Naomi, smiling with that wide, disarming grin she had since they were kids. The one who raised him when their mother overdosed and their father ran off. The one who called him every birthday while he was deployed, no matter the time zone. She'd been killed in a hit-and-run 5 years ago. Crescent County PD never investigated. Whitaker crushed the photo under his boot, grinding her face into the dirt. Oops. That was the moment Elijah felt it, like a snap inside his skull. But he didn't move, didn't blink. Just counted. 1, 2, 3. They wanted a reaction. They wanted the black man to rise. To snarl, to resist, because then they could justify it. Aggressive, threatening, dangerous. That's how it always started. Then came the cuffs, the charges, the mugshots with a story attached that buried the truth 6 feet deep. So he didn't move. They beat him anyway. Vicious knees to the ribs. Baton strikes to the kidneys, fists hammering the sides of his head until the world flickered white, then black. Someone drove a boot down on his hand as he tried to shield his face. Another kneed his thigh so hard the muscle cramped into a frozen knot. And then the powder appeared. "You smell that?" one deputy said, tossing a baggie near the trash he'd been digging through. "Looks like our drifter's got a little habit. Possession with intent," Whitaker announced with mock solemnity. "Guess he ain't just hungry, he's a damn junkie." They cuffed him right there, with blood still leaking down his shirt and sandwich bits stuck to his palm. They didn't drive him to the county station. Instead, they took a dirt road off the highway, far from city lights, far from witnesses. They pulled him out in a clearing, laughed, and kicked him some more. When they were done, they threw him in a holding cell behind a rusted-out courthouse and locked the door. That was 4 hours ago. Now, Elijah sat still in the dim light, one eye barely open, breathing slowly, steady. Focused. To the guards, he looked broken. Like all the others, they'd been roughed up before and shoved through the system. Another black man with no ID, no home, no family left to call. But they were wrong, because this wasn't his ending. It was theirs. Elijah's breath fogged faintly in the cold air as he listened. He wasn't listening for mercy or help. No cavalry was coming. He was counting footsteps, memorizing guard shifts, and pacing the rhythm of patrol routes. Just like he had outside Fallujah in 07. Just like he had inside the compound in Niger in 13. They thought they'd cornered an animal. They hadn't realized they'd woken up a warfighter. He pressed his head back against the wall, closed his good eye, and let the pain wash over him, not to wallow, but to map it. Each bruise, each fracture, each sting and burn was data, information. The ribs weren't broken, just bruised. The left hand still worked. His jaw ached, but he could speak. The thigh muscle. Torn, probably. That'd slow him, but it didn't stop him. He replayed the attack in his mind, over and over. Whitaker's stance. The way one deputy, tall, wiry, with a patchy beard, favored his left side. The fat one telegraphed his punches. None of them moved like fighters. They were schoolyard bullies with badges and small-town immunity. He knew how to deal with men like that. Elijah's mind flicked to the old drainage tunnel behind the courthouse. He'd seen it years ago, during a winter storm, when Crescent County nearly flooded. It connected to the irrigation runoff that bled out toward Cypress Creek. He hadn't thought about that tunnel in years. But now it was his exit. A low hum rattled the floor, probably the generator kicking on. A buzz in the fluorescent light flickered once, then steadied. Elijah cracked his knuckles with slow, controlled movements, not to intimidate anyone. Just to feel the bones realign. He had to get out, not just to run. Not just to hide, to expose them, to make them pay. The system had failed Naomi, ignored her death, dismissed her brother as disposable. But Elijah Ward was not disposable. He was trained, he was focused. And now, he was angry. He reached slowly toward the inside hem of his coat, where a tiny slit had been sewn years ago by a friend in the unit. His fingertip brushed metal. The lockpick was still there, thin, discreet, hidden in the lining. They hadn't found it. The sound of keys jingling snapped him back to the moment. One of the guards is approaching. Maybe to gloat. Maybe to feed him a stale sandwich and laugh in his face. It didn't matter. Elijah's eyes opened, sharp and calm. His breath was even. The fire was awake now, and this time it wasn't going out. The back of the patrol SUV smelled like blood, spit, and old leather. Elijah Ward sat shackled in the cage of steel and glass, his wrists cuffed tight behind his back, ankles locked together in a way designed not just for transport, but humiliation. The heat inside the vehicle was oppressive. The AC was off. The vents blew nothing but the stink of sweat and old beer from the front seat, where Sheriff Dean Whitaker sat slouched in the passenger side, boots on the dash, puffing on a Swisher Sweet like the world belonged to him. "You awake back there, soldier boy?" Whitaker called over his shoulder, not turning around. "Good, 'cause I want you to remember what happens to your kind when you forget your place." The driver chuckled. Deputy Casey Rayburn, the sheriff's bulldog. Stocky. Thick-necked. Always smirked like every situation was his personal joke. "Say, Sheriff," Rayburn said, "should I keep us off the main road? Or you want to parade this one through town first?" Whitaker grinned, his mirrored sunglasses catching the dying sunlight. "Nah, no need for a show. Let's take him out to Hollow Ridge. Let the trees talk to him." Elijah didn't respond. He didn't ask questions. Didn't plead or shout. That's what they wanted. That's what every predator wants, a display of fear before the kill. But Elijah Ward wasn't prey, not even close. As the SUV veered off the paved road onto a dirt trail that wound deeper into the Mississippi backwoods, Elijah leaned his head back and breathed through his nose. Pine, oil, diesel. The vehicle dipped and bounced over roots and gravel, headlights barely piercing the gathering dusk. He began counting. 1, 2, 3. Each second grounded him. Anchored him. A technique from his Special Forces days. Block the panic. Focus on the breath. Activate memory. Plan. The vehicle stopped with a crunch of gravel. No sirens, no backup. Just woods, silence, and bad intentions. Whitaker climbed out first, cracking his neck like he was about to hit a punching bag. Rayburn came around the side, opened the back door, and yanked Elijah out by the shoulder. He hit the ground hard, knees first, before being jerked up by the chain between his cuffs. "On your feet, boy," Rayburn said, smirking. Elijah looked around. They were miles from the county line, no traffic, no cameras. Nothing but pine trees and shadows. Hollow Ridge. Local black folks called it Hangman's Mouth. Everyone else called it Wilderness. Whitaker leaned against the hood of the SUV, arms crossed, baton dangling from his belt. "You think you can embarrass me? Make me look dirty on the damn radio?" His voice was calm, controlled. That made it worse. "I ought to put a bullet in your head and say you reached for a gun." Elijah's lip curled, but only for a breath. "I never said your name," he said quietly. "If it struck a nerve, that's on you." Whitaker's mouth twitched. For a moment, something primal flashed across his face. Then with sudden speed, he lashed out, his boot connecting with Elijah's ribs. Elijah collapsed sideways, the pain flashing white-hot through his side. Rayburn laughed. "You believe this guy?" "Still got jokes." "I want him gone," Whitaker said, turning his back. "Nobody, no prints." "No noise." Rayburn drew his service pistol and chambered around with a casual click. "Should have stayed in the damn sand, soldier," he said, leveling the gun. Elijah didn't hesitate. He twisted on the ground, rolling toward the tree line, kicking up a cloud of dirt. The motion caught Rayburn off guard, just enough. The first bullet missed. By the time Rayburn adjusted, Elijah was gone, vanished into the dark like a ghost. The woods swallowed him whole. Every branch, every root, every shadow was an ally or an ambush. Still cuffed behind his back, Elijah ran. He didn't sprint. He moved with purpose. Speed without noise. Eyes wide, ears tracking the direction of the voices behind him. The pain in his ribs flared with every breath, but it was familiar, manageable. He dropped to the ground near a fallen log and rolled until the cuffs scraped against the edge of a jagged stone embedded in the dirt. Sharp, just enough to wear the metal down. He gritted his teeth and sawed. Voices behind him, closer. "Where'd he go?" Rayburn's voice, panicked now. "You had a clear shot," Whitaker barked. Elijah didn't stop. His pulse thudded in his ears, blending with the soft hiss of insects and rustle of leaves. 10 seconds. 20. The cuff snapped. One side sprang open. He flipped onto his back and used the freed hand to wrench the other cuff off his wrist. His skin was raw, bleeding. He didn't care. He grabbed a length of fallen pine branch, snapped it at a clean angle, and shaped it into a crude stabbing spike. Not ideal. But it would do. Movement ahead. Flashlight beams sweeping in wide arcs. Elijah climbed a tree. He did it fast, fluidly, like second nature. Once high enough, he crouched among the limbs, motionless, breathing through his teeth as the deputies passed beneath him. "Fan out," Whitaker growled. "He's ex-military. He's not going to just lie down and die. He's going to try to flank us." A pause. "Doesn't matter. Once we're done here, I'll put out the call. Armed and dangerous fugitive escaped custody. Assaulted an officer. Suspected gang ties. And if he makes it to town, we'll have every badge in the state hunting his black ass." Elijah heard every word, memorized every syllable. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about warfare. He waited until they passed, then dropped silently from the tree and vanished deeper into the woods. No lights, no trail, just instinct. By the time Whitaker and his men realized they'd lost him, Elijah was already 3 miles away, barefoot, bleeding, but alive. An hour later, the sirens began. By dawn, every news station in Mississippi was running the story. Fugitive veteran escapes custody, armed dangerous. Breaking: Elijah Ward, former U.S. Army Green Beret, assaults officers, escapes from custody, suspected of ties to organized crime. Sheriff Whitaker: we won't rest until this dangerous man is brought in. The mugshot they used was 8 years old, right after Elijah had been booked in Atlanta for a misdemeanor trespassing charge during a protest. The lighting was harsh. His expression was tense. They said he was violent. Mentally unstable, possibly using drugs. They said he resisted arrest and that he attacked a deputy with a stolen knife. They never mentioned the bruises, the cuffs, the fact that he was unarmed. They never mentioned the clearing in Hollow Ridge. Within 24 hours, Crescent County was locked down. Checkpoints are at every major road. Drones are scanning the forest. Militia volunteers, white men with trucker hats and American flags painted across their trucks, handing out flyers and shining spotlights into the woods like it was a hunting trip. But Elijah wasn't prey. He was trained for this. He'd escaped war zones in Afghanistan with less than this. Now, he was going to burn their lies down, brick by brick. This was no longer about running. It was about returning fire. The sky above the pines had darkened to a heavy blue, the air thick with humidity and the scent of impending rain. Elijah Ward crouched in the ditch beside the gravel service road, motionless as the county patrol car idled 15 yards away. Red and blue lights pulsed lazily atop the roof, cutting slow arcs across the treetops. Inside the vehicle, a deputy sat with his window down, boots on the dash, a burger in one hand, the radio crackling beside him. Elijah watched, timed his breaths. The deputy was alone. Young, too young, one of Whitaker's new hires, more brawn than training. The rookie laughed at something he heard through his earpiece, wiped his greasy hand on his vest, then leaned back and closed his eyes. Elijah moved. 3 strides. That's all it took. He was out of the ditch and across the road before the deputy even heard the gravel crunch underfoot. The window shattered under the weight of the steel pipe Elijah had scavenged hours earlier, the glass exploding inward like a shotgun blast of diamonds. The deputy yelled, half surprise, half pain, as Elijah's arm snaked through the window and gripped his collar. He dragged him halfway out, then slammed his head against the frame. Once. Twice. The deputy went limp, slumping onto the gravel with a dull thud. Elijah yanked open the driver's door, tossed the deputy into the ditch like garbage, and slid into the seat. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the interior, noting everything. A body cam hung unplugged from the dash. The onboard radio was still hot. But it wasn't the microphone he reached for. It was the small black thumb drive clipped to the side of the center console. Marked, Incident Backup 0812. Elijah had planted the bait days ago. Whispered rumors in the alley behind Morrison's bar. Made sure the right ears heard it. I talked loud enough about Whitaker's late-night meetings at the quarry, the cash trades, and the unregistered shipments routed through the old warehouse on Sand Hill Road. And the deputy, Hicks, according to his name tag, had done what green cops do best. He'd bragged, loudly. Repeated things he didn't understand, pressed the wrong button, forgot to wipe the logs. Elijah slotted the drive into the car's auxiliary port and opened the channel. The screen blinked. The audio loaded. A grainy recording filled the cabin. Sheriff Dean Whitaker's voice, unmistakable, growling through static. Tell Mitchell to move the pills through the salvage yard next week. Don't screw it up this time. And if that Ward bastard shows up again, I want him buried. You hear me? Buried. Elijah's breath stayed steady. His fingers hovered over the transmit key. The frequency was public. Every unit in Crescent County would hear it. Most of the South Precinct, maybe even a few press scanners. It wasn't proof of everything, but it was a crack. And if he timed it right, hit them where it hurt, maybe the whole facade would start to crumble. He keyed the mic. To the people of Crescent County, this is Elijah Ward. The name alone was a thunderclap across the airwaves. He heard it instantly, the static stiffen. Dispatch stutter. Another voice come through on an open line, scrambling to override. He pressed harder, louder. They tried to kill me in the woods behind Hollow Ridge. Sheriff Dean Whitaker planted drugs on me, ordered his men to execute me without trial. And for those of you who still doubt it, he pressed play. Whitaker's voice spilled out of the patrol car speakers and out into the county. Move the pills through the salvage yard. I want him buried. The signal echoed through the scanner net. Elijah let it play for 30 seconds, just enough to burn it into memory, then spoke again. There's more. I've got footage, documents. Every dirty dollar that man took from Crescent County's own suffering, every overdose he enabled, every family he let rot so his pockets stayed lined. The mic popped. Someone at dispatch had found the override button, but it was too late. Elijah yanked the drive from the console, slipped it into his pocket, and stepped out of the vehicle just as the deputy behind him groaned. He didn't look back. He moved toward the woods. The transmission is already fading, but its aftershocks are just beginning. By nightfall, the story had started to fracture. WNXT News 9 ran a segment on the mysterious radio hijack. A few local bloggers posted the audio leak. Then the tweets started, poorly clipped recordings from cell phones, hashtags sprouting like wildfire. #Ward warning, #dirty sheriff, #justice for Elijah. Elijah sat on a ridge above town, tucked beneath an outcropping of limestone, battered but not broken. He listened to the ripple through the scanners. Deputies bickering. Some confused, some furious. One voice cut through, female, hoarse, trembling. Dispatch, this is Deputy Sandler, I'm out. I won't be part of a lynch mob. This isn't why I put on the badge. A pause, then static. Then another voice, gruffer but steady. Same here, I'm done. 2 cracks in the armor. Small but real. Elijah leaned back, the cold rock pressing into his spine. He closed his eyes for a moment. Pain throbbed behind his ribs. His fingers were still raw from the cuffs. His legs ached. His mind was exhausted. But somewhere down below, at least a few people had started asking the right questions. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a voice, and the system that tried to bury him had just felt the first tremor. This war wasn't going to be fought with fists and bullets alone. It was going to be fought with truth. And tonight, Elijah Ward had made them listen. The fire started in the northeast corner of the camp, under the bridge where the tents were stitched together from tarp, hope, and despair. No warning, no warrant, no mercy. Just the whoosh of gasoline, the flick of a match, and the thunder of boots moving with purpose. Sheriff Dean Whitaker didn't send deputies this time. He sent the State Tactical Response Unit. Armor-clad, faces hidden behind mirrored visors, riot batons gripped like warhammers. They came in a convoy of black SUVs and state-leased trucks at dawn, their engines snarling like a declaration. The command? Purge the rats. Burn the nest. Blame the ghost. The ghost is Elijah Ward. The lie was already prepared, typed up in neat bullet points and delivered to the press via an anonymous law enforcement source. A fugitive had been spotted near the camp. Armed, unstable, possible bomb maker. The county was taking no chances. But Elijah wasn't in the camp, not at first. He was 5 miles away, crouched in the rafters of an abandoned barn, watching through binoculars as a separate team of officers loaded sealed crates into an unmarked truck. Pills, likely. Fentanyl. Meth. All headed east. Whitaker built all parts of the empire behind the badge. Then the first column of smoke rose in the distance. It was black, oily, and wrong. Elijah's heart went still, the camp. He ran. The Crescent Creek homeless encampment wasn't much, but it was home to those who had none. Veterans. Mothers, teens who aged out of foster care. They built what they could from scraps and generosity. Shared food, took turns on night watch with nothing but flashlights and knives. Elijah had spent weeks there before going underground. Taught them how to disappear, how to survive. Now, their world was being erased. The riot troops didn't yell commands, they didn't issue warnings. They advanced like machines, smashing what stood, torching what didn't. Boots crushed children's toys, blankets, and old family photo frames. An elderly man named Clarence took a baton to the temple while trying to shield a woman from having her tent burned. He died face first in the dirt, still clutching a rosary. A young mother screamed for her son as flames overtook their tarp. A medic tent was flipped and stomped into canvas scraps. Someone tried to film. A state trooper shattered the phone and the wrist holding it. They weren't there to arrest anyone. They were there to cleanse. And on every radio channel, Whitaker's voice crackled through, calm and full of poison. "We've got visual confirmation Elijah Ward was spotted at the scene. This was his doing. He's a threat to public safety. Any interference is obstruction." By the time Elijah reached the tree line near the camp, the fire had consumed half the lot. The screams hit him first, then the smoke. Then the heat. It rolled across the field like war. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted in, weaving between panicked bodies, coughing through the thick soot, eyes stinging. "Help! Help!" someone shrieked. It was a child's voice. Elijah pivoted toward the source. A makeshift shelter of shipping pallets now ablaze, the roof sagging inward. A girl, maybe 6, stood frozen inside. Tears streaked her soot-stained face. Her leg was pinned beneath a splintered beam. Elijah surged forward, ripping the burning wood aside with bare hands. Flesh sizzled. He didn't feel it. Not yet. He scooped the girl into his arms, wrapped her in his jacket, and burst through the curtain of fire just as the roof collapsed behind them. They tumbled into the dirt, the girl coughing, sobbing against his chest. "You're okay," he rasped, checking her limbs. "You're okay, baby girl. You're safe." She clung to him like he was gravity itself. Then he felt it, something missing. He reached for his coat pocket. The photograph, gone. The picture of Naomi. His sister. The one piece he had left of her. The snapshot he carried through 2 tours, a prison cell, and now a war on home soil. He turned back toward the blaze. The jacket, the pocket, it had caught fire. The picture must have burned. For the first time in years, Elijah felt hollow, not angry, not scared. Empty. The girl's name was Rosie. Her mother hadn't made it out. Elijah found that out an hour later, hiding with her beneath a storm drain while sirens still howled above. Her eyes were wide, rimmed red. Her dress was scorched. She clutched a melted action figure like it was sacred. "Where's my mom?" she whispered. Elijah couldn't answer. So he held her tighter. He wasn't just carrying a child now. He was carrying the consequence. News coverage rolled in by noon. Channel 7, WNXT, played the state's edited footage on loop. Drone clips showed Elijah, holding Rosie, running through the smoke. The chyron read, "Fugitive Elijah Ward endangers child during alleged arson attack." A press conference followed. Sheriff Whitaker stood before microphones, calm and righteous. "This man is a domestic terrorist. He started the fire to sow chaos. He used that little girl as a human shield. Our officers risked their lives to contain the damage." Elijah watched from a drain pipe a mile away, blood seeping from his palms, fists clenched so tight they trembled. Not a word about the troopers, not a word about Clarence, or Rosie's mother, or the old woman they left to burn in her wheelchair. The system was rewriting the truth before the ashes cooled, and somewhere, deep in the guts of that press event, a few viewers shook their heads in silence, unsure. Maybe Elijah was dangerous, maybe not. The doubt was the point. That night, Elijah carried Rosie 5 miles through swamp and back road to reach Clara, the traveling nurse who owed him one from years ago. She took the girl in. No questions. Just a whisper, "God help us all." Elijah stood outside her shack, looking back toward the smoldering horizon. He felt something inside him lock into place. The loss of that photo, the only image of Naomi left on earth, was more than symbolic. It was ignition. They hadn't just attacked a camp, they desecrated his memory. His purpose. Now, he wasn't fighting for survival, or for justice, or even revenge. Now, he was fighting for the truth. To rip the mask off every cop who stood in that circle and called it law. To make Whitaker feel what it meant to burn, not just to die, but to lose everything. The wound in Elijah Ward's shoulder festered with the same rot he saw blooming across Crescent County. It wasn't just infection, it was trauma and vengeance. And time is running out. The bullet had punched through clean but took muscle with it. His makeshift bandage, a torn strip of canvas coated in antiseptic that Clara gave him, had stopped the bleeding but barely slowed the fever. The gash on his side from the beam that collapsed during Rosie's rescue was deeper than he thought. It is stuck shut with a fishing line and cauterized with a heated tent peg. No anesthesia. No help. Only resolve. He spent 3 days hiding in the cistern beneath an abandoned mill, fevered and coughing blood into a rag, listening to the county above him spin lies. Whitaker's voice still dominated the airwaves. "We will not be intimidated by this terrorist. He's wounded, on the run, and desperate, and that makes him dangerous." He was right. Elijah was desperate, but not in the way Whitaker wanted people to believe. He wasn't desperate to escape. He was desperate to start the next phase, and it began with fire. Whitaker's drug storage hub sat like a parasite in the east end of town, behind the defunct rail yard, nestled between a rusted tractor factory and a slaughterhouse that hadn't opened its doors since the recession. Locals called it Lot 46. The sheriff's men called it the Coop, and Elijah knew exactly what it was, a nerve center. Everything flowed through it. Meth, fentanyl, prescription opiates. Packed into crates marked as building supplies and surplus medicals. Elijah had cased the place during his early days, sleeping under overpasses. He knew the security schedule. I knew which deputy liked to drink at the post. Knew the one guard dog was half blind and hated loud noise. He didn't need an army, just precision. And rage, and the right kind of chaos. On the 4th night after the fire, Elijah crawled out from the mill, wrapped his body in black vinyl to seal in heat and scent, and moved toward Lot 46 like a shadow slipping under barbed wire. He carried no rifle, only a crowbar, 3 jury-rigged firebombs made from liquor bottles and motor oil, and a stolen radio from the last patrol car he gutted. By 2:17 a.m. he was inside the perimeter. No alarms, no movement. 2 deputies stood on the loading dock, laughing over something on a phone. They wore body armor. Neither had their rifles shouldered. Elijah waited for a freight train to pass in the distance, let the ground rumble, let the noise blanket his sprint. When it did, he moved. The first deputy didn't see him until the crowbar shattered his knee. The second tried to reach for his holster but caught the bottle of fire to the chest. He didn't scream. The flame stole his breath. Elijah smashed the lock on the warehouse door, ducked inside, and struck the match. The fuel tanks were on the west wall, half-filled plastic drums for the generators that powered the cold storage units. He rolled one across the floor, kicked over another, and popped the caps on the remaining firebombs. Then he lit the soaked rag of his last bottle, turned to the camera mounted near the rafters, and said into the stolen radio, "This one's for Rosie's mother." He tossed the flame. The explosion wasn't cinematic, it was raw, animalistic, the kind that rips open oxygen itself. The coop didn't erupt, it peeled apart. Walls blew out. The roof collapsed inward. The crates burst into chemical fireworks, pills burning, plastic melting, glass bottles detonating like landmines. The entire sky above Crescent's east side turned orange. Whitaker's dispatchers scrambled. Police scanners lit up. "We've got fire at Lot 46. Shots fired. Possible casualties. Someone breached the damn coop." Deputies scrambled in every direction, unsure whether it was a rival gang, a protest, or another attack from the fugitive. But Elijah had already melted back into the night, limping, burned, bleeding, but alive and satisfied. By noon the next day, the financial ripples began to surface. Crescent County's budget shortfalls were old news. Everyone assumed they were due to poor taxes or Whitaker's bloated patrol fleet. But this was different. Without the drugs, the laundering stopped. Without the laundering, the payoff slowed. And when the payoff slowed, the sheriff's people started to talk. A junior deputy was caught trying to sell body cam footage to a podcaster. A warehouse loader turned whistleblower. One of Whitaker's trusted lieutenants skipped town. The crack was spreading. And through it all, the media clung to the only narrative they were fed. Elijah Ward, former Green Beret, now domestic terrorist, may be escalating attacks. But some reporters began to dig deeper. One local anchor, Monique James, ended her segment that night with a quiet question. If Elijah Ward is so dangerous, why is he always one step ahead? Back in the woods, Elijah rinsed the ash from his face in a cold creek. His left hand shook when he tried to clean the burn on his wrist. The pain was worse now, deeper, but it kept him awake. He stared at the creek's rippling surface. Reflected there, a man with hollow eyes, ragged beard, bloodied shoulder, charred sleeves. But under the exhaustion, under the wounds, there was something else. A strategy. He had the advantage now. Whitaker had grown arrogant, dependent on fear and force. But Elijah had broken the financial backbone of that machine, and he was far from done. This was no longer survival. This was an asymmetric war. And Elijah Ward was the ghost they could no longer outrun. They came for him with torches and flags. The Iron Cross Reclaimers. A name made to sound like a biker club or Civil War reenactors, but Elijah Ward knew better. These were domestic insurgents, plain and simple, fueled by hate, uniformed in camouflage and bloodlust, and sanctioned by a sheriff too cowardly to wear the hood himself. Dean Whitaker didn't start the fire. He just made sure the gas cans were full when the matches arrived. The group had been whispered about in Crescent County for years, drunk whispers in bars, cryptic tattoos on forearms in back alleys, Confederate patches on plate carriers that weren't issued by any department. But after Elijah's radio broadcast exposed Whitaker's corruption, after the audio leak started making the rounds on social media and local news, the whispers hardened into marching orders. And now they hunted. The night they caught him was thick with fog, moonless and wet with swamp humidity. Elijah had been tracking a food drop, an abandoned ranger cabin that still had canned goods and iodine tablets. He was down to 2 bandages and a bruised lung. His ribs screamed with every step. But he didn't hear them until it was too late. A spotlight flared like lightning through the pines. Then the roar of engines. Pickup trucks with steel grills and bumper stickers that spat hate. Flags, American, Confederate, and the red X emblem of the reclaimers, flapped violently in the wind. Elijah ran. Fast, hard, but his body was a battlefield, scars stacked on bruises, stacked on fractures. His breath tore through his chest like barbed wire. His hands are still raw from breaking free days earlier. A snare wire wrapped around his ankle. He hit the ground, hard. Before he could move, boots were stomping through brush. Voices shouting, dogs barking, they dragged him from the forest floor. Elijah fought even as his limbs failed him. He broke his nose with his elbow, cracked a collarbone with his boot heel. But they overwhelmed him. 10, maybe 15 men. One of them slammed the butt of a rifle into the side of his head. The world flipped. And everything went dark. When Elijah came to, he was hanging, not metaphorically. Not symbolically. He was hanging, a noose dug into the raw skin of his throat. Rough hemp rope, looped and cinched. His feet were off the ground by inches, his arms bound behind him, his chest heaving. They had tied him to a sycamore tree, just like the old postcards, just like the Southern tradition. Dozens of men stood in a half-circle beneath the branches. Some wore camo fatigues. Others had hunting vests or sheriff's department windbreakers with the patches removed. One of them wore a red trucker hat that said "God, Guns, Guts." Another, lean, bearded, with ice-cold eyes, stepped forward. He was their leader. Elijah knew it immediately. "We got ourselves a messenger, boys," the man drawled, holding up Elijah's stolen drive. "Sheriff said this one's been spreading poison." Calls himself a veteran, but he fights for the enemy. Laughter, spitting. One man lit a flare and tossed it at Elijah's boots, just to see if he'd flinch. He didn't. The leader leaned in. "You know what this is, boy?" He pulled a patch from his vest pocket. A red X over a black cross. "This is Crescent County's reset button." He stepped back. Another man, bigger, meaner, drunker, raised his shotgun and fired. The blast tore through Elijah's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Blood painted the bark behind him. The rope yanked tighter as his body sagged. He gasped, his mouth opening, eyes widening. Pain exploded in his skull. His ribs convulsed. His legs kicked in reflex. Another man approached and drove a boot into his ribs. Then another. And another. Still, Elijah didn't scream. He wouldn't give them that. The bearded leader shook his head. "Still won't beg." He nodded once. 2 reclaimers stepped forward and cut the rope. Elijah crumpled to the ground like a sack of bricks, gasping, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Leave him," the leader said. "Let the swamp finish what we started." They didn't even fire the kill shot. They just walked off, laughing, dragging their torches and flags back toward the idling trucks, engines revving like wolves howling into the night. They thought they'd killed him. They thought the swamp would drown him. They didn't know Elijah Ward. The pain was unspeakable. His shoulder was a wreck, blood gushing in pulses. His throat was raw, purpled and torn where the rope had nearly crushed his windpipe. His ribs cracked with every breath. His vision swam in static and black stars. But he was alive. Barely. Elijah crawled. 1 inch at a time, through swamp water, mud, and rotting leaves. Blood trailed behind him, thick and dark. Somewhere in the dark, a cottonmouth slithered past his hand. He didn't flinch. He didn't have the strength to. He made it to a tree hollow, half submerged, barely wide enough to fit his frame. He curled inside it like a broken animal, holding his breath every time a twig snapped in the distance. And then the fever hit. 3 days passed, maybe more. He burned inside his body. Dreamed of Naomi, his sister, calling out from across the river where they used to skip stones. Dreamed of boot camp, firefights. The face of the boy he couldn't save in Fallujah, the sound of Whitaker's voice on the radio, laughing, but somewhere beneath it all, a voice whispered, "Get up, they think you're dead, stay dead." And then burn them down. Elijah emerged from that hollow not as a man, but as something else. His arm was torn, but wrapped in strips of his own shirt. The bullet wound still oozed, but it was clotted. His skin was pale, bruised, sick with infection, but he moved. Slower. Stronger, colder. They had hanged him. Shot him, stomped on him, left him in the mud like trash. But he rose, and he remembered. Every face. Every name. The reclaimers. Whitaker. The deputy with the crooked nose, the one with the red hat. He remembered the way they laughed. He remembered the sound of the rope creaking under his weight. He remembered the moment his feet left the ground and the world started to fade. And now they would remember him. Elijah disappeared into the night. Not to flee. To hunt, to infiltrate, to dismantle the machine, one bolt at a time. They'd called him a terrorist. They'd framed him as a drug-dealing, cop-killing black savage. They'd tried to erase him. But what they didn't understand was this. A man who survives a noose and a shotgun becomes something else entirely. They didn't kill Elijah Ward. They resurrected something far more dangerous. Elijah Ward moved through the dark like a shadow sharpened by pain. His leg bled again, fresh splits in the old wound from the warehouse fire. His shoulder, half cauterized and barely functional, throbbed with each step. But none of it slowed him, because this time it was Naya, 16, daughter of Naomi, his sister's only child, his last living link to family. And Whitaker had her, not in jail, not in a cell, but in the Red Claw mercenary base, a private fortress of bought guns, run by killers who didn't wear badges because they'd traded those in for paychecks and war crimes. The Red Claw wasn't just muscle, it was a containment black site, an unofficial place to store problem assets Whitaker couldn't risk booking publicly. No paper trail, no cameras, just cages, pain, and silence. Nia had been dragged from her grandmother's house 4 nights ago, live on a drone feed, her screams muffled under a man's gloved hand. They broadcasted on Channel 6 with the caption, "Relative of domestic terrorist taken for questioning. No warrants, no lawyer." No due process, just a message. From Whitaker to Elijah, "You come for me, and I'll erase your bloodline." The Red Claw base was buried deep in the pine woods north of town. Old oil refinery turned compound, concrete towers, spotlights. 6 watchmen with ARs on rotation. No insignia, no names, just tactical gear and cold precision. Elijah scoped it for hours from the tree line. He counted movement patterns, noted power lines, marked the fuel tanks behind the barracks. Watched where the guards went to smoke. Then he waited for the thunderstorm. When the rain came, it drowned the cameras in static and shorted the south floodlights. The mercenaries shrugged it off as bad infrastructure. It was Elijah's opening. He slipped under the wire fence, rolled between the barracks, and crawled beneath a fuel pipe. 2 guards stood outside the metal-walled holding unit. They barely had time to react. The first took a knife under the chin. The second got a steel rod across the larynx. Elijah caught him before he hit the ground, dragged them both into the rain. Took a rifle, a sidearm, and their key card. Inside, the cell stank of rust and disinfectant. He found her in the second room, bound, mouth duct-taped, wrists bruised. Her eyes are wide, still defiant. Her face was Naomi's. Same jawline, same stare. He whispered, "Nia." "It's me," she shook, then nodded. He tore off the tape and caught her as she fell into him. "They said you were dead," she gasped. He pulled her close. "I was." The alarm tripped when a third guard found the missing patrolman. By then, Elijah and Nia were already in the fuel depot. He gave her a flare. "Strike it when I say." "What will that do?" "Shut them down." "How do you know?" "Because I know fire," he said, "and what it can do to evil." They rigged the explosives together, makeshift charges from stored diesel drums and old mine detonators set to blow on chain ignition. Then Elijah pushed Nia through the drainage tunnel at the back of the compound. "Go, you head to Clara." "Take the back roads." She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'm not done here." He sprinted back through the main corridor, flipped a breaker, and sent a surge through the backup grid. The whole base flickered into chaos. Monitors shorted, alarms jammed, doors unlatched, guards yelling in confusion. Elijah climbed the tower ladder and lit a road flare, holding it high. On cue, the depot erupted in fire. The entire southern compound turned into an inferno. Plumes of black smoke rising like hell had cracked the earth. Sheriff Whitaker saw the explosion from his campaign stage. He was in the middle of a live national rally, broadcast from the courthouse steps. Flags everywhere. State patrol flanking him. Hundreds of white voters in red caps were chanting his name. Crescent County was about to announce Whitaker's intention to run for state senate, to bring law and order to Jackson and protect Mississippi from the virus of urban terrorism. The screen behind him showed his propaganda highlight reel. The raid on the homeless camp, spliced to make Elijah look like an arsonist. Footage of Nia, edited to appear as if she confessed. Then, mid-sentence, Whitaker stopped. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The screen behind him glitched, then changed. To him, Elijah Ward, bloodied, wet from the storm. Standing in the firelight, broadcast directly into Whitaker's own rally via hijacked uplink, his voice cut through the cheers like a bullet. "My name is Elijah Ward. Crescent County knows who I am. The state knows who I am. And now the country will know what he is." Behind him, the Red Claw base burned in full view, clear proof that Whitaker had operated a private black site. "He took my niece without cause, burned a camp full of innocents, framed me, lied to you all again and again, but I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not just a soldier. I am the proof of everything he's tried to bury." The crowd froze. Some cheered. Some booed, but the silence of the press corps said everything. Whitaker's face went pale. He reached for his mic. Cut it off, but the signal held. Elijah had locked it in. "I've already sent documents, audio, video, testimony. The FBI has them. The media has them. Sheriff Dean Whitaker is not a protector. He's a cartel in a uniform." A moment of stunned silence followed. Then Elijah said the last line. "You wanted war. Now it's your turn to run." The screen went black. Chaos followed. Reporters screamed questions. Whitaker fled the stage. Channel 6 cut to commercials. National news broke the feed wide open, and Elijah Ward disappeared into the shadows once more. Only this time, the whole country had seen him stand. They came without warning. No insignias, no state plates. No jurisdiction, just matte black choppers, ghost-colored Humvees, and men who spoke in code and moved like they'd trained in every war the U.S. never admitted to. Whitaker had called in something beyond local, beyond even the state. These weren't deputies. They weren't the Red Claw mercs from last week either. These were Directive 7, a private military outfit that answered only to their funders and the highest bidder. And Sheriff Dean Whitaker was now that bidder. After Elijah Ward's broadcast at the courthouse rally, Whitaker's empire had cracked but not collapsed. The FBI opened a preliminary investigation. Half the state's political elite distanced themselves, but none disavowed. The local media dared to air both sides, and then promptly shut up when their sponsors received anonymous security assessments. Whitaker still controlled the streets. The comm towers, the drones, and now he had Directive 7. It was no longer about the law. It was controlled through overwhelming violence. And in this war, Crescent County was the battlefield. 3 nights after the rally, Elijah and Nia hid in the charred shell of an old VFW hall, one of the few places not yet burned by Whitaker's scorched earth campaign. Elijah stitched his shoulder in silence. Nia lay on a cot nearby, IV dripping into her arm, her breath shallow but steady. "You still good, kid?" he rasped, checking her pulse. She gave him a weak smirk. "You look worse." He smiled, cracked lips barely lifting. They'd made it out of Red Claw, but the fallout was far from over. Outside, the air buzzed with tension. The city had entered a silent lockdown, not by order, by presence. Drones now flew in formation overhead. Checkpoints appeared overnight. Neighborhoods were split by razor wire. Black families fled Crescent in droves. Those who stayed lived under the sound of boots and surveillance. And then the drones started firing. It happened on the 4th day. A grocery line in the West Ward. Dozens of residents were waiting for rations distributed by volunteer medics. Nia had insisted on going. "I need to help," she said. "I can't just hide." She was halfway through handing out water bottles when the whine cut through the air, high, sharp, mechanical. A drone dipped low, targeting laser blinking red. Someone shouted, "Get down!" Too late. The first blast hit the pavement, shattering concrete, ripping through 2 bodies. The second exploded near the med tent. The third hit the stack of food crates where Nia stood. Elijah was there in under 3 minutes. He found her face down in the rubble, smoke curling from her torn hoodie, one leg shredded, blood soaking the dirt. He screamed, louder than he had in combat, louder than he had been when they beat him in jail. Louder than when he lost Naomi. He carried her through chaos, past the burning crates and the dead, past a family wailing over their son's body, past the reporters too afraid to film. He laid her down in a church basement, now turned into a trauma ward. And she looked at him with eyes that barely stayed open. "I'm not done," she whispered. "Yes, you are," he said. "For now, you've done enough." Then he turned to Clara and said 3 words. "Keep her breathing." Directive 7 unleashed open war that night. They raided all remaining safe houses, leveled an apartment block on East Hamilton, took over Channel 6's station, and replaced it with a looped feed. Elijah Ward's mugshot, labeled "Terrorist Domestic Insurgent," playing every 15 minutes. Their drones now fired on sight. They weren't looking to arrest him anymore. They were looking to erase him, and anyone who had ever helped him. Elijah struck back. He hit the fuel lines, took out a convoy with roadside mines. Leaked satellite footage of Directive 7 receiving payments through shell corporations tied to Whitaker's re-election fund. But it wasn't enough, because now the city was bleeding faster than he could patch it. And when he found out Whitaker was broadcasting his final victory speech from the old city archives, the same building Elijah once slept behind when he had nothing left, that's when he knew what had to happen. He had to end it. That night. Elijah infiltrated the archives compound with 2 things, a C4 rigged pack and a military radio tapped into Whitaker's private comms. He got within 60 yards before they spotted him. The drones came first, 3 of them, each with a mounted 30mm short-range cannon. Elijah rolled under the first blast, returned fire with a scoped rifle, 1 shot to the rotor, downing it in a spiral of metal and smoke. The second clipped him. His ribs lit up, something cracked. The third hit the building behind him, shrapnel ripping through the alley. He limped to cover, bleeding again, hearing boots. Hearing comms bark. "Confirm kill on site. Repeat, he's the package." Then the ground exploded, not from his doing. A Directive 7 RPG had struck a gas main near the archive's side wall. The entire corner of the building collapsed, bricks and beams crashing down. Elijah tried to run. too slow. The blast wave hit him like a truck. The last thing he saw was the sky turning orange. Then black. Then nothing. The news broke by midnight. Fugitive Elijah Ward, presumed dead in the rubble of the city archives following a gun battle with federal contractors. Crescent County is now under full state control. Whitaker expected to return to public office after stabilizing the crisis. Channel 6 looped old footage of Elijah, battered and silent in jail. A state senator said he was a man who chose violence. They didn't show the burned camp, didn't show the drones. Didn't show Nia's torn leg, just a closed coffin and a sheriff's smile, but in a shelter near the West Ward, Nia stirred awake. Clara sat beside her. So did a federal marshal with a folder full of questions. And across the city, a young man named Jamal, who once shared a cot with Elijah during the cold months, slipped a hard drive into a courier bag. On it, everything: audio, video, transfers, proof, the kind of truth Elijah died trying to expose. Except Elijah Ward wasn't dead, not yet. Beneath the rubble, under layers of stone and ash, a hand moved. Then fingers twitched, then breathed, shallow. Ragged, alive. The evil may have had resources. But Elijah had one thing they never could buy: purpose. For 72 hours, Crescent County held its breath, waiting for final silence, for the flickering resistance to fade into black smoke and rubble. Elijah Ward was gone. Buried in the ruins of the city archives, declared dead by every news outlet from Birmingham to D.C., Sheriff Dean Whitaker stood in front of Channel 6's live cameras, bathed in artificial light, wearing a crisp khaki uniform and that glassy, predatory smile he reserved for victory. "The war is over," he said. "We have secured this city from domestic terrorism. Elijah Ward chose violence. I chose justice." Behind him, the flag waved stiffly in the breeze, tattered by the storms, but filmed to look triumphant. And behind that flag was a lie so thick it blanketed the entire county like smoke, until the footage surfaced. It started as a whisper, Reddit, encrypted Discord servers. A tweet from an anonymous burner account tagged @TrueJusticeSouth. The video was grainy, surveillance cam angle, timestamp blurred, but the voice was unmistakable. "Light the tents. Leave no witnesses." The voice of Sheriff Dean Whitaker, the night of the homeless campfire. Then the second file. Crackling audio, pulled from what sounded like a phone tap. "The church is a nest. If they want a martyr, I'll give them one. Burn it." 2 sentences, 14 words, enough to fracture the floor under Whitaker's empire. By morning, the clips had over 6 million views. By afternoon, national media was running one word across the chyron: whistleblower. The files kept coming. Body cam footage. Audio recordings from militia planning sessions. Financial records showing transfers from a shadowy PAC into private military accounts, including Directive 7. And then came the final nail. A direct line from Whitaker's personal account to a known weapons contractor for the drone strikes that hit civilians, including the one that tore through Nia Ward's leg. Even seasoned journalists, those who'd spent careers tiptoeing around power, couldn't spin this. This wasn't just a local sheriff overstepping. This was a domestic war orchestrated under the mask of law enforcement. The FBI's response was instant and brutal. At 4:42 a.m., a convoy of black Suburbans rolled into Crescent under federal authority. They hit Whitaker's mansion first, on the hill overlooking the west side, the one untouched by fire. He didn't resist. Too cocky, too insulated, too sure that the machine he'd fed for decades would protect him. They cuffed him on his front lawn, barefoot, robe flapping in the wind, as floodlights lit up his red face. He screamed, "This is treason! This is my town!" The agents didn't respond. They just read him his rights. By midday, it was a domino collapse. Blackthorn operatives were detained at regional airports trying to flee. Militia leaders, those who hadn't already fled to the backwoods, were pulled from hidden bunkers in the Delta. Directive 7 disbanded its Mississippi team, citing contract irregularities, but quietly handed over internal logs to avoid indictment. Channel 6 aired a 2-hour special report titled, "The War in Crescent, What We Missed." Nobody apologized. Nobody confessed. But one by one, the system began to eat its own. Back in the FEMA field hospital, Nia Ward sat upright for the first time in days. The shrapnel had been removed. Her leg was still raw, the wound deep, but she could breathe again. Clara brought her the tablet. "You need to see this." Nia opened it, and there on screen was Whitaker, in cuffs. Face bruised, walking a federal hallway with cameras flashing. She didn't cry. Didn't smile. She just whispered, "He's done." In a scorched stretch of forest just outside town, 2 medics dragged a body from the rubble of the archives, burned. Broken, ribs shattered, pulse faint. The man's dog tags were half melted, but legible. Ward, EUS. Army OPOS. The medic leaned down. "You're a damn ghost," she muttered, and Elijah Ward's hand gripped her wrist. Alive. Barely, but alive. The identity of the whistleblower was never confirmed. Some said it was a former aide to Whitaker, guilt-ridden. Others claimed it was a rogue federal agent. A few believed it was Jamal, the young man who once slept beside Elijah, now missing from Crescent entirely. But in truth, it didn't matter. The whistleblower didn't need a name. They'd already done what Elijah tried to do with blood and fire: expose the truth, tear off the bad-shaped mask, and end the lie. That night, Crescent County didn't celebrate. Too many dead. Too many wounds. Too many churches turned to ash, but they exhaled. For the first time in weeks, no drones flew. No boots stomped, no sirens blared, and the city, though broken, breathed. The city smelled like ash, even after the rains, even after the bulldozers came to clear the broken homes, the melted street signs, the carcasses of buildings that once held stories. Even after the fires stopped, Crescent still carried the scent of memory, burned deep into its concrete, its churches, its skin. But for the first time in a long time, there was no gunfire, no choppers. No curfew sirens, only the sound of hammers, the scraping of brooms. The quiet voices of people learning how to live again. Inside the makeshift rehab wing of the FEMA hospital, Nia Ward stared out through a pane of scratched plastic at what used to be Jefferson High. Now just a husk. She didn't say much these days, didn't complain, didn't cry. The doctors had saved her leg, but not all of it. The lower calf was gone. A crude stump wrapped in gauze, soon to be replaced with a prosthetic. Her once fluid stride, the walk of someone who loved to dance when no one was looking, was gone. Her future, altered. Her body changed, but her spirit, harder. Sharper, still burning. People came and went, bringing flowers, food, sometimes questions they didn't have the courage to ask aloud. "How are you holding up? Have they found out who leaked the tapes? Do you think your uncle's really gone?" She answered none of them, not directly. Only when Clara visited did Nia speak. And only one question mattered now. Did he leave anything? Clara hesitated, then reached into her coat and placed something in Nia's hand. A dog tag. Military style, scuffed, worn. But instead of a name, it just read, Ghost. Nia stared at it for a long time. Then she closed her fingers around it and nodded. The search for Elijah Ward's body had been slow, chaotic, and ultimately inconclusive. The medics who pulled someone from the rubble at the city archives refused to give statements. The hospital logs had one John Doe listed, admitted with blast trauma, internal bleeding, partial amnesia, but that record mysteriously vanished 2 days later. FEMA claimed it was a clerical error. The federal agent shrugged and said, "Probably one of the militiamen." And Channel 6? They ran a glossy obituary with his army photo, cropped tight so you couldn't see the broken nose or the blood that once ran down his cheek in a Crescent jail cell. Elijah Ward, local hero or violent rebel. The debate raged for a week. Then the next crisis hit somewhere else and America moved on. But inside Crescent, the legend grew. He was spotted at a gas station near Gulfport. A man with a limp bought antibiotics in Tupelo with cash. A drifter in Little Rock fixed a woman's car and disappeared before sunrise. Always the same description: black, quiet. Sharp eyes, walked like he'd memorized every escape route within a city block. The kind of man who'd been hunted so long, even peace felt like a trap. The FBI never closed the whistleblower file. The files had come from a secure source, encrypted. Professionally timed. The IPs bounced through 6 countries. The voice match confirmations are perfect. Too perfect. Some thought it was someone inside the sheriff's office. Others thought it was a ghost in the system, someone who wanted justice but knew the law wouldn't deliver it. And then there were those who believed in the simplest answer, that Elijah Ward hadn't just fought the system, he'd beat it. Then vanished to make sure no one could use him again. At the rebuilt community center, someone mounted a mural near the entrance. Black and white. Painted in jagged strokes, it showed a man not with a face but a silhouette, one hand raised. One boot lifted, one eye was visible through the shadows. Above him, flames. Below him, broken chains. And at the bottom, just a single name: the Ghost. Naya wheeled up to it one morning, still in recovery, learning the prosthetic. She stared for a long time. Didn't smile, didn't cry, just reached into her hoodie and pulled out the metal tag. She pressed it gently to the edge of the mural where someone had nailed a strip of corkboard for community messages. She pinned the tag beneath the painting, then walked away, limping, but walking. Later that night, a janitor found a folded note under the tag. It read, "I didn't fight for statues or headlines. I fought so someone like her could grow up without fear. Keep building, keep resisting, you won't see me again. But I'll be watching. Gee, no fingerprints, no security footage, just a note." Just the tag, just the possibility. So the city moved forward. Rebuilt, remembered, and wondered. Was he still alive? And if so, where is the ghost now? Crescent County may one day forget the fire. It may pave over the craters, rebuild the church walls, and repaint the streets scrubbed raw with blood, but it will never forget the man who stood alone when the entire system pointed a gun at his back. Elijah Ward was no martyr. He was no symbol on a poster, no perfectly posed savior in a flag-draped uniform. He was a man, flawed, bleeding, running, haunted by memories of war and a sister lost to a system that refused to count her as human. But when no one else would stand, he did. Not with a podium or a press release, but with grit, silence, and scars that spoke louder than any headline. The story of Crescent County is not just one of corruption. It's a warning that racism, when dressed in a uniform and backed by a budget, becomes law. That when those with power write the rules, injustice is not a glitch, it's the system functioning exactly as designed. Whitaker didn't act alone. He was a sheriff, yes, but also a mirror, a reflection of every badge that looks away, every courtroom that shrugs off a lynching with a shrug and a technicality. The ghosts of America don't haunt graveyards. They haunt our policies, our prisons. our silence. But there's another truth carved into this fire. Victory doesn't always come from armies. Sometimes it comes from a man with nothing but a scarred body and a broken radio. Sometimes it comes from a niece refusing to stay silent. Sometimes it comes from a whistleblower we'll never name. The system didn't crack because it chose justice. It cracked because it was dragged into the light by someone who refused to be erased. Elijah didn't win, not in the way movies like to frame it. He lost too much, his peace, his name, maybe even his life. But he shifted the story. He forced the system to look at itself. Justice, when it comes, never comes clean. It comes through smoke, through broken bone and trembling hands, through children learning how to walk again after a drone strike, through lies broadcast as truth until someone breaks the feed. And maybe that's the real legacy of the ghost. Not a hero, not a savior, but a man who refused to sit still while the world burned around him. One person. One spark, and now the fire can't be put out. Stand up. Speak out. Expose what they try to bury. Hit like if you believe in the power of resistance. Subscribe to Injustice Unmasked to make sure these stories are never erased. And share this now, because the more people who see the truth, the harder it becomes to hide it. This isn't the end. It's the beginning, because ghosts don't die, they rise. And they watch.